National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
The United States Supreme Court has agreed to take up a key abortion case in 2024. The nation's highest court will weigh in on how patients can access a widely used abortion pill, mifepristone. The Register's national correspondent, Lauretta brings us this story and more from the Register's coverage of abortion in the U.S. But first, we get an update on what seems to be a standoff between the Vatican and German bishops. This comes from Jonathan Liedl, who has been reporting on this story from Rome. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Executive Director of the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency, and I'm your host here on Register Radio. I'm joined by my co-host Matthew Bunson, who is EWTN News' Vice President and Editorial Director. The Vatican and the Catholic bishops of Germany, as you've heard on this show many times, are engaged in this high-stakes game of what Jonathan has called before on the show, ecclesiastical chicken. It's basically a standoff that's centered on the German synodal way, and we're going to get an update on that today from Jonathan. The Vatican has basically issued verbal stop signs all along the way over the last 2 years, basically. But the bishops have, and the synodal way, basically, has continued to push forward with their controversial agenda. We're going to hear a lot more about that agenda and how it is moving forward. But recently, Pope Francis appointed 2 new German bishops last weekend. And we want to know how these will play into the German synodal way. So, Jonathan Liedl, we're happy to have you joining us from Rome. Thanks for being with us.
Great to be with you, Jeanette and Matthew.
So, as I said, we've got 2 new bishops. I am not going to try to pronounce their names. I will leave that to you and Matthew, who are much better at language than me. But these 2 bishops may have an effect on the dynamics that are happening in Germany right now regarding the synodal way. So, Jonathan, what can you tell us about the 2 bishops who were appointed recently?
You know, Germany has had actually 4 dioceses without bishops, some for over a year, but in total, really going back to March, there's been these 4 vacancies. And so a lot of people have looked to these vacancies and said, hey, if the Pope wants to do something about the situation in Germany, we know that he's issued any number of verbal critiques of the synodal way, expressed his concerns on it. But a lot of people said, hey, if he really wants to do something about it, maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe it's a chance to kind of put his guys, if you will, or at least bishops who are going to be openly critical of the synodal way and maybe not participate in some elements into key positions. So
it's natural to think that, right? I mean, it's obviously natural you would put maybe mediating people in these new appointments. So I hear you.
Yeah. Well, and it's absolutely the case that there's no other way that the Vatican made these appointments without taking the wider context of the synodal way into account. So obviously you're concerned about the diocese you're putting a man in charge of as its pastor. But given, that high stakes game of ecclesial chicken, as I like to call it, you can't help but take that into account when making these appointments. So is that what happened? Well, on Saturday, the news came out of the Vatican in the Bulletino at noon that the Pope had picked not just 1, but 2 new archbishops in Germany, something that, according to German media, had not happened at least in recent memory, recent history, that you get 2 new archbishops in a country with only 27 dioceses. So who are those bishops? Well, they're Bishop Herwig Gesell, who actually was elevated from being the diocesan administrator of an archdiocese called Bamberg in Bavaria, and he'll be the new archbishop of it. And then Bishop Udo Benz, who's been an auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of Mainz and is now the Archbishop of Paderborn. But to go back to what I said at the beginning, how do these guys affect the synodal way? And are they those kinds of big shake-up picks that some people thought the Pope might do? I think the answer is not quite. I think you can definitely look at Bishop Gesell, and he's definitely perhaps more in the more conservative spectrum of the German bishops. He voted against, back in September, if we recall, there was this a base text at a synodal way assembly, really advancing all kinds of heterodox ideas on sexuality, that 21 bishops voted against and basically spiked it. And he was one of the ones to vote against it. He also just said after his appointment that while maybe an issue like mandatory priestly celibacy is something that in his opinion could be handled differently in different parts of the world, when it comes to church structure, when it comes to ordination and the male-only holy orders, that's something that Germany has to be doing in lockstep with the universal church. So perhaps more conservative, but him, like Bishop Benz, who is probably more of a typical pro-synodal way German bishop, these guys voted to establish this synodal committee that's setting up that permanent synodal council that you mentioned in the introduction the Vatican has banned. So really the assessment from people on the ground in Germany is that no, this is not a big shake-up pick from Pope Francis, but rather it's more a move to perhaps elevate some more moderate voices in the German episcopacy.
Yeah, and Gussel also endorsed the resolution, didn't he? What was basically a demand from the synodal way for reevaluating the teachings of the church on homosexuality within the magisterium, right?
Yeah, he did. And so I think and that might illustrate, honestly, what I've heard from people in Germany about Herwig Gussel. That vote back in September that I mentioned, that happened before the votes were public, right? So he was one of 21 bishops who kind of under the cloak of anonymity felt comfortable voting against that. But once the organizers of the synodal way said, no, all your votes are going to be on the record now, he kind of changed his tune. That vote you talked about, Matthew, yes, he voted yes for. On a number of other controversial issues, he abstained from voting. So the sense I've gotten from talking to people with him is that, yes, he's definitely has some conservative sensibilities about him. I mean, conservative is not the right word, right? Like some sensibilities that are in harmony with the universal faith of the church, right, when it comes to issues like sexuality and ordination and church governance. But people, the read is that he's not going to be one of these stalwarts, right? We think of people like Cardinal Rainer Welke of Cologne. We think of Bishop Stephen Oster of Passau, Bishop Rudolf Voderhoser of Regensburg, Bishop Gregor Henke of Eichstätt. These are the four bishops who have publicly said, no, we're not going to continue participating in the next phase of the synodal way, the synodal committee. The Vatican has said 9, right, and we're backing off, right. But the sense is that Bishop Gussel, even though he might have some conservative sensibilities, at least right now, is not probably in a position to join them. So that's kind of where it's at.
So what does this tell us about the Vatican's approach to this? Because it sounds as though they have a known quantity of bishops, a known body in front of them, and they would have to do something really dramatic, wouldn't they, in order to make substantive changes within the German episcopate?
Yeah, I think what we can really clearly see is that for whatever reason, the Vatican is choosing not to upset the apple cart. We might already say that there's already a crisis in Germany, right? So, but the Vatican is not choosing to be heavy-handed, right? They're not choosing to intervene strongly, at least with action in the affairs of the Catholic Church in Germany. Pope Francis every 3 months or so has pretty pointed comments about the German synodal way. And in fact, back in November, when they were holding their first committee meeting to set up the synodal council, a letter that he had written to 4 German Catholic laywomen was published. And actually the Secretary of State of the Vatican was very eager to have the women publish it when they asked for permission. And the Pope said that there are concrete steps being taken in Germany right now that threaten to take the church increasingly further away from the path of the universal church. And he cited the synodal committee in particular. So the words are strong, but you're right, Matthew. I think I'm going to just share based off the background conversations I've had with people, including bishops in Germany. Like, the situation seems to be this. The majority of German bishops are not interested in schism with Rome. They are not ideologically committed enough to the elements of the synodal way to risk serious disciplinary action or even being excommunicated from Rome. Most of the German bishops are not that's not where they're at, right? But at the same time, the German bishops, many of them, because they have sympathies with some of the elements of the synodal way, because they feel such an extraordinary amount of pressure from kind of powerful German lay organizations, church employee lobbies, diocesan associations, and also the media, or a combination of all those factors. They're not going to change what they've been doing without Vatican intervention. So the Vatican has prioritized dialogue. They had talks with the delegation of the German bishops back in July. They're going to have another talk in January, 2 more in 2024 before we reach in October the second session of the Universal Church's Synod on Synodality. So the Vatican, they seem to think, okay, we're going to keep the dialogue going. We're going to put moderates like Gessel and Bentz in place. But my sense, Matthew, I'd love to hear what you think, is that without actual agitation from the Vatican, without upping the pressure, no amount of dialogue and no amount of moderates kind of in the German episcopacy is actually going to compel more German bishops to break away from the synodal way, because they just don't, A, they don't think the Vatican will come down on them hard enough if they don't, and then B, they just think the negative repercussions within Germany are actually going to be worse for them. So that seems to be where the situation is at, if you will.
Yeah.
Jonathan, it's fascinating to me because it seems to me that the church is so bad off, from the ground up, that you need these bishops to take courage, to take heart. It's so strange to see bishops in a place of a sort of ambiguity, like, oh, we're just going to sort of stay in this gray zone, right? Rather than truly lead. It makes you ask the question, well, who's in charge? Who is actually leading the church? And how do you answer that question, having studied this now for a good year?
Yeah, who is leading the church in Germany? Well, I had one conversation. I answered in a sideways way. I had a conversation with a bishop recently in Germany, and he was not necessarily optimistic about how this would be resolved. But he said, really, what matters in Germany are not these big structures they have in place, these big diocesan apparatuses, but what really matters are kind of the spiritual oases in Germany, and there are still good places where the faith is vital. Where it's being lived out. There are some good bishops. There are some good dioceses. So, yeah, it's kind of a crisis of leadership from the German bishops who are effectively they are the bishop, right? Their job is to shepherd, but they just feel so constrained by so many of these elements, and so it's difficult to see a way out if no one, as you talked about, Jeanette, no one steps up with confidence and says, yeah, I might face incredible ridicule. I might face, like, the German press might just completely rake me through the coals. My diocesan employees might turn their back on me completely. I might be the most isolated man in my diocese, but I have to do something, right? Because at the end of the day, simply keeping the status quo going is not what I'm called to do. I'm called to teach the gospel and to stand for it. And so I think at the very least we can hope and pray that some of these German bishops who are kind of on the fence, are inspired by the martyrs, are inspired by Christ and the truth that there's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend, right, and to lay down your life in a way for the church in Germany. So definitely something to pay attention to.
Absolutely, and that Christ is the same, right? Yesterday, today, and always. So we do pray for that. We pray for that maybe as a Christmas blessing, a Christmas hope. So, Jonathan, thank you for following the important news related to the German Church and the Vatican. When we come back, we'll talk about abortion cases that are making the way to the Supreme Court and in some state courts with Lauretta Brown, the National Catholic Register's national reporter. This is Register Radio on EWTN. Stay tuned for more.
If you need your news on the go, read the Register online. But if you want to take your time and savor the stories, then subscribe to the National Catholic Register's print edition. And with award-winning Catholic journalism that goes beyond what you'll find from any secular news service, you'll get the real story behind the events that unfold over the course of the year. Try the Register for free today and get it delivered to your home, office, or parish. Join the Catholics who depend on the Register for its faithful and courageous reporting. Get 6 issues free today online at ncregister.com/radio or call 800-421-3230 and mention code radio. That's ncregister.com/radio or call 800-421-3230 and mention code radio. The National Catholic Register. Read faithfully.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
Welcome back. I'm Jeanette DeMello, Executive Director of the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency. I'm here with Matthew Bunson, my co-host on Register Radio. This week has been a big week in the battle over abortion access in our country. The U.S. Supreme Court will be taking up a case related to the growing use, widely used abortion pill. And 3 state Supreme Courts have also been considering high-profile cases this week. Lauretta Brown is the one who covers a lot of this kind of news for the National Catholic Register as our national correspondent. And she joins us now to talk about these cases, a kind of overview of these cases. Hi, Lauretta.
Hi, Jeanette.
So first of all, we've got this case in the Supreme Court that they're willing to take up an abortion pill case. This is actually big news because this has been causing a lot of anxiety around the country over how widely accessible the abortion pill is, and there's a great amount of concern over this abortion pill. So we've got a case that the court has agreed to take up. Can you tell us a little bit about what that case involves? What are they going to be deciding?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're considering the approval process for this abortion pill. And as you mentioned, people have had significant concerns with the FDA approval. So what the court is looking at, has agreed to look at, is kind of the restrictions on the abortion pill that have been lifted. So there used to be like an in-person requirement prior to taking the pill or to receiving it, where you would have to meet with a medical professional and have some sort of screening. And now it's, by mail or telehealth. It's the Biden administration, FDA has just kind of widely allowed that. So this is really an opportunity to take a hard look at some of these significant concerns related to just allowing the abortion pill to come to people by mail, because some of these concerns, I've talked to pro-lifers who just consistently raise these, is ectopic pregnancy can be missed, serious conditions like that. And then there's also the gestational age. If it's taken later in pregnancy, past the 10 weeks that the FDA has approved, it's so dangerous. There's statistics on that. Pro-life doctors have spoken to that, have really raised the alarm on that. And then there's also even just the question of, people being able to access this pill so easily. There was a male reporter, I remember seeing a story where he had ordered an abortion pill regimen under a false name, was able to get access everything, and he was like, "Wow, I don't know if maybe I should be able, to do all that." So, really, some things that I think it's good that the court is taking a hard look at. Are there safeguards in place? What were the considerations when the FDA allowed this wide access to these pills?
Right. So what we know is that the case will be heard this term, which means there's likely a decision by summer. So we don't know any more about the key dates in this, but obviously there'll be the oral arguments, and then late in the term, usually at the very end, we get a decision. So this will be a very interesting thing for us to follow in 2024. But as I mentioned in the intro, there were other cases making their way through state courts that were significant. What are those that we should note?
Yeah, well, the one really making headlines this week was a case in Texas where a woman, she's carrying a child with trisomy 18, and that's the vast majority of cases that condition is fatal. When the baby's born, it passes away shortly after or up to a year after, and so she was denied an abortion, and it looks now, the latest I saw, she was traveling out of state to get one, but I guess the case being made there was a risk to her future fertility, possibly, some concerns over just even health concerns there with carrying the pregnancy, and there was a whole medical discussion around that, but following that case, it was just interesting to see there really does seem to be a strategy from abortion advocates of talking about these pregnant women who have more complicated cases like that. And what was kind of saddening to me, frankly, as someone who has been involved with the communities of people with disabilities and having a brother who has Down syndrome and autism, is to see how quickly people were saying, oh yeah, trisomy 18, why isn't there just some broad exception where you can just get an abortion? Like, why does there even have to be risk to the mother? Like, yeah, why is that worth going through that? And it is disheartening to see that dialogue around this case, because there were people speaking out who have children with trisomy 18, and in some rare cases, they live into their teens. I mean, former Senator Rick Santorum spoke out about his daughter Bella with the condition, who's like literally a miraculous witness to the lives these children can lead. And so it's been an interesting case to follow, and to see in these other states also, there's just this focus on these exceptions, these hard cases. But what I'm hearing from pro-life advocates on this is just consistently, there's the concern for both lives. There's nobody wants to, have these women in danger, certainly. But having a child with challenges is not the same thing as, being in medical danger.
That's right, and also to sympathize with this woman who is experiencing this in Texas. Kate Cox is her name. It's a tragedy when you find out that your child has in utero has a disability like this. This is a woman who has 2 other kids. She wanted this child, but this is what she was was understanding was her only option for her own health, and that's a really sad case. I myself I've lost a child to trisomy 18 in utero. I had a miscarriage. It was the same diagnosis, right? And it is a tragedy. Like I feel for this woman. I pray for this woman. But the loss is as weighty as it is something you can endure. And that's something that we just we can't even talk about as a country anymore, because this is so. It's all about rights of the woman, and not enough sometimes about how to help her through these kind of moments. And so this is really, it's something that touches my heart. And really, I look at what the abortion movement is doing and bringing up these special kinds of cases, and it makes me question, Lauretta, what can we do more as a pro-life community to talk about these issues? Do you know what pro-life leaders are saying about these kind of cases, and how to reach women who really get confused by stuff like this?
Yeah, absolutely. What I have been hearing is compassion is so key here, and this is the other thing is, looking at these cases from the legal perspective and the different regulations, it can sound very cold and more removed. But I've heard so much from pro-life leaders is we want to show that we are concerned for the woman here. It's not a situation where we're just saying, oh, this woman just has, one thing she can do and we don't really care otherwise. No, absolutely. There's so much compassion for looking to what resources can we provide. For example, I spoke today with the president of Texas Right to Life, and he was telling me about an organization in Texas that provides counseling and resources when there's a tough diagnosis like this to women, to families. And I think that has to be a key part of the response to any situation like this. Because, even in my own personal life and with people I've known, you see the impact of something like that. It's not easy. It's not easy to go through that, to get a tough diagnosis and to know that you have to find the strength and the resources to get through that. But that's, in my experience, always been a key part of the pro-life movement is there's always been voices in the Pregnancy Resource Center, certainly, but even beyond that, the voices for those with disabilities, for their dignity, and not just, saying that, but also providing the community, these support groups for moms, these resources. So definitely that has to be a key part here.
Absolutely. There are women who have experienced this, who have mourned that loss, and who can help accompany others. And I think that's where we need to make it better known that there is a network of support, and that abortion doesn't have to be the answer. And that's a message I think we're going to be seeing the need to lean into in 2024, because this is going to be a tough year for the abortion battle. Lauretta, I'm always grateful for your coverage of the pro-life issues and of abortion in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Thanks for joining us here on Register Radio on EWTN. For Matthew Bunson and our producer, Jeff Burson, I'm Jeanette DeMello, and until next week, I pray God bless you.
For more information about the National Catholic Register and about Register Radio, go to ncregister.com. Podcasts of Register Radio are posted on ncregister.com and on EWTN.com. Join us next week at this time for Register Radio on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Lord Jesus Christ, who are called the Prince of Peace, who are yourself our peace and reconciliation, who so often said, "Peace to you," grant us peace. Make all men and women witnesses of truth, justice, and brotherly love. Banish from their hearts whatever might endanger peace. Enlighten our rulers, that they may guarantee and defend the great gift of peace. May all the peoples of the earth become as brothers and sisters. May longed-for peace blossom forth and reign always over us all. Amen.
The EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Count on us to bring you the splendor of truth.
Thank you so much. I thank God every day for EWTN. I just love this station, and everybody is so knowledgeable and helpful. I've learned a lot.
At home, at work, or in the car, we're always there for you.